This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather, ho there, it's Jeff Cutastrophe. Welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, December the 2nd, in the year 1995, 27 years ago, an event shaped up, ruined one franchise forever, and brought one franchise to kind of a partial ruin and one franchise to an absolute haven, if you will. So it's December 2nd, 1995. A little-known game was held at the Montreal Forum in Montreal. It was the last time that the Detroit Red Wings, one of the original six, would be headed to Montreal to play a game at the historic Montreal Forum. It was huge and all that. They had Red Wing and Habs legends side by side because this was, of course, the last time the Red Wings and Habs would be in the Forum. It was a decent snowy day in Southern Ontario. I, as a 10-year-old precocious little boy, went to the Bright Santa Claus Parade. I'm from the small town of Plattsville, and another small town, Bright, had the Santa Claus Parade. And every year I go see the Santa Claus Parade. On the first Saturday of December, that's the biggest event. I know, the first Saturday in December is the Santa Claus Parade. So I went to the Santa Claus Parade and all that. And so, I stayed overnight at my grandma's, going to go to church the next day. Now, of course, would I be excited for a Detroit-Montreal hockey game? Not really. Not when you're in the Leafs region. I mean, yeah, I had a soft spot for Montreal because of Patrick Roy, but otherwise, not so much. So it's October 2nd, 1995. Me and my grandmother walked to a place, to a friend of Grandma's by the name of Ethel Cassidy. And she had a house that, Grandma would be close by. And it wasn't that far away, so we would visit and all that, and, watch hockey and all that. At least the first period, before going home for the second period and me sleeping. So anyway, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Anaheim Ducks taking on each other. That game would actually take a back seat to the horrors of what would be happening in Montreal. So the Red Wings would take on the Habs, and the Red Wings were decent. They were 15-6-2 to start the season, whereas Montreal were 12-10-1. Montreal had just recovered from the Jacques Demers experiment, in which they lost their first 5 games, dumped him off for Mario Tremblay, and Mario Tremblay's first game as Habs head coach, the Habs scored a late second goal to take down the Leafs at the Forum. But Montreal started picking up the pace. Mario Tremblay was pretty good and all that. The only issue is Mario Tremblay had problems with Patrick Roy to start goalie. It all started one day as I get... Oh, is it upstairs? Yeah. I've just been informed that my Patrick Roy autobiography is upstairs in my bedroom, which means I don't have the access to... Oh, no, there it is. Okay, hang on one sec. So I will quote you directly from the Patrick Roy book. Patrick Roy, Winning Nothing Else. So, yeah. It would be huge and all that. So, yeah. It doesn't matter. Anyway. Yeah. It's a huge move and all that. Alright. So Mario Tremblay was trying to talk to his house team at the first game of it. And as chapter 23, the rupture says, we have to play toast-to-toast with the Maple Leafs. He meant toe-to-toe or even coast-to-coast. But he said toast-to-toast. But with his strong French-Canadian accent, seemed like toast-to-toast. Patrick lowered his head and tried not to laugh. Well, Patrick Roy and Mario Tremblay were roommates on the road. Patrick was a rookie, Tremblay was a veteran. Patrick Waugh and Mike Keane were both laughing. And Trombley said, "What's so funny? It's nothing against you, Mario. It's just express yourself. Express yourself. Nothing against you. What do you find so funny, Sete? Do you think this is a fucking joke?" But things weren't laughing anymore. Yeah, that's from the Patrick Waugh book. I think his dad, Michelle, wrote. So, yeah. So, it all started with him mispronouncing English and all that. And, of course, the Habs won that game. So, Montreal went on a bit of a winning streak. But why Trombley, their relationship fractured. They almost came to blows at a Montreal coffee shop. So, anyway, regardless, the Red Wings were coming to town. Mike Ferdinand would face Patrick Waugh in the nets. The weird thing is that Sky Bowman made Mike Ferdinand exclusively the road goalie, whereas Chris Osgood would play home games. But yeah, Detroit, it was just amazing. 30 seconds into the game, a big scrap happened as Jerry McCarty and Turner Stevenson fought. And then after Fowler Burry was off for hooking, Igor Larionov got a pass from Sergei Fedorov and Paul Coffey to make it 1-0. Small spoiler, Igor Larionov will be a future birthday boy soon. So anyway, the Red Wings looked good. And then a second goal came from Vladimir Kozlov. As Slava Kozlov scored from Larionov and Vladimir Konstantinov. And then the Habs got lucky as Keith Primo took an interference penalty and Mark Recchi scored to make it 2-1 for the Red Wings. Little did anyone know that this would be the only goal Montreal would score in this game. And then a minute after that, at the 10:13 mark, Slava Kozlov did it again. From Fedorov and Mark Bergevin. Remember him, Montreal fans? And you St. Louis Blues fans by him throwing the puck into the net in the 2000 playoffs? Yeah, that guy. And then after Patrice Brisebois got a check-in from behind in a game misconduct penalty, alongside he was out, and Yves Racine got a holding call. On a two-man power play, Detroit would put up a pair of goals. As Nick Lidstrom scored from the point from Greg Johnson and Paul Coffey. Get you there. I know I had to say that. And then at the 19:01 mark, a minute later, Greg Johnson would score his second point of that power play from Yzerman and Paul Coffey. So the Red Wings were up 5-1 after one period. Normally, if I were a coach, I'd be like, well, let's just get Waugh out of the game and let Jablonski come in, because after all, it's one period. It's 5-1. You might as well get Jablonski. And if, the team plays better with Jablonski, then you can put Patrick Waugh back in for the third period. But he let Waugh in the net. So Trombley let him in. And then Slava Kozlov scored from Fedorov and Fetisov. So Kozlov had a hat trick. The Russian five were doing quite well. And then at the 4:30 mark, Matthew Dadonov, I didn't know he played in 1995, but he did. He scored from Steve Yzerman, so Dadonov made it 7-1. Get the hook. No. Why are you letting him 7 goals? I mean, come back another day. But then, there was a selection from Fedorov. Waugh made the easy 50-foot save and then put his hands up and all that in mock surrender or something, mock cheers. The fans were not too happy about it. After Greg Johnson and Sergei Fedorov both scored goals. Well, Johnson's was from Primo and Bob Rouse. Remember him, Leaf fans? And then the Red Wings, Fedorov from Larionov. Game over. Now, you pull Patrick Waugh. And he did. It was 9-1. Montreal finally yanked him for Patrick Jablonski. Waugh made his way to his heat for the backup goalies. He would have to cross the assistant coaches and Mario Tremblay. After Mario Tremblay gave him kind of a smug look and all that, Patrick Waugh then sidestepped himself and went back and talked to Ronald Corey, the president of the Habs, and told him something. And then he sat down on the end of the bench. So Ronald Corey looked a little concerned. It was like, what the frig was going on with Patrick Waugh? So the Detroit play-by-play guys were actually picking up on it faster than CBC with Chris Cuthbert and Dick Irvin. But yeah, it was hard to watch. And then, when watching the Ducks Leafs game, I would be interrupted by updates of the Red Wings Habs game and all that. And Patrick Waugh left the bench and said something. I was like, oh boy, now what? But Patrick Waugh was a good guy, in a sense. Unfortunately for the Habs, that was not the point. Jablonski would give up 2 late goals to Slava Kozlov, who put up a hat trick himself. So his 4th goal for Slava Kozlov, and then Matthew Denino's 2nd of the game. So in the end, it was too little, too late, and the Detroit Red Wings win 11-1. Now that would be huge, because 11-1, handing Montreal's worst home defeat at the Forum in history. And the Forum was about to be shut down in March of '96. So, and then all of a sudden, they were in for it. Detroit was a powerful team. I mean, after all, this was the team that won 62 games and set the record for most wins in a season. Although it's a little tainted because of the fact that they had 82 games, whereas the 1977 Habs, who had the record, had 80 games to do it, so they had 2 extra games. And B is that games went to overtime with the Red Wings, but with the Habs, games never went to overtime until 1983. So that's a little bit of a bias, don't you think? I think that Montreal probably would have pulled off a few overtime wins and had that impossible record. But let's not beat around the bush. Mario Tremblay was questioned, and he said that practically he thought that maybe he would have Waugh stick around for the 2nd period and then take him out for the 3rd period. He should have done it for 5-6 goals, but he didn't think it was much of a difference. Well, it was. Waugh was vilified, and rightfully so. I mean, I understand what he said to Ronald Corey, the Habs president. But I mean, after all, things were deteriorating between Tremblay and Waugh and all that. Chris Osgood even said that he figured that Patrick Waugh would do better with a change of scenery. So, logically, Waugh would be traded. I mean, Rajon Roule made no bones about it. He was going to trade Patrick Waugh. He didn't want to move to Montreal after that fit. Well, 4 days later, December 6, 1995, he would send Waugh and Mike Keane to Colorado for Andrei Kovalenko, Martin Rushinsky. No, sorry, not Rushinsky. Was it Rushinsky? No, Kamensky. No, it's No, it was Rushinsky and Kovalenko. And I don't think Kamensky was a habitant. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, and then, you're right. And then Jocelyn Thibault. So Thibault will be going to replace Patrick Waugh in Montreal, but this being the starting goalie and all that. And Thibault's mask design paid homage to Jacques Plante's first mask in 1959. That was pretty cool. So, yeah. So, Montreal had problems because they traded their captain away. And Mike Keane was one of the co-conspirators in that laughing fit. But here's the thing. The Habs would trade their captain a few more times within 18 months. So, Montreal was a ship without a rudder. But regardless, the Habs would actually recover and make the playoffs. They actually had a 2-0 series lead on the New York Rangers in the first round. Sadly, though, they would blow it, losing 4 straight, and the Rangers moved on to the second round. The Habs would have another playoff failure in '97, losing to the Devils in 5 games. It wasn't a sweep. Patrice Brisebois, would make it that way. Anyhow, the Habs would falter. They did get to the second round in '98, but they got swept by Buffalo, and then they went downhill ever since. There were rumors that the Habs were going to be sold to an American, which they were, with George Gillette. But thankfully, Gillette decided to keep the team in Montreal. Oh my God, would you believed it? If he's moved the team elsewhere? No. So yeah, so Montreal did get to the playoffs in 2002 and almost got to the Stanley Cup semifinals, but a stupid game called the Molson Miracle ruined that in Game 4 of the 2002 second round against the Canes. Montreal would get to the Stanley Cup final in 2021, on a Cinderella run, a major Cinderella run. They weren't expected to come back from 3-1 down against the Leafs, but they did. But they lost the cup. But anyway, yeah, it kind of ruined Montreal's franchise fortunes, if you will. For Detroit, it ruined it in a way because with Patrick Roy now playing for Colorado, well, it used to be Quebec City, the Quebec Nordiques, and definitely the Habs would not have traded Roy to an Eastern Conference team, much less Quebec. So now that Colorado seemed to be the big cheese of things, it was like, oh boy, here we go again. This doesn't look good. Detroit would learn that Colorado would be a big cheese with Patrick Roy in the net. I mean, no disrespect to Craig Billington, but yeah, he was that good. Anyway, the Colorado Avalanche would face Detroit in the Stanley Cup semifinals or the conference finals. I know it was that series that Darren McCurdy, that Chris Draper got blindsided by Claude Lemieux and cost Claude Lemieux 2 games in the finals, but still, it's a rivalry. It was the start of the Avalanche Red Wings rivalry that lasted for 7 years, and which was very huge. But regardless, the Red Wings were upset because their 62-win season went up in smoke. But they did win back-to-back Stanley Cups. And let's not forget about the Avalanche. Yes, they won the Cup in 96. But with Patrick Roy, would they have won the Cup in 2001? I doubt that highly. Colorado were forced in the Western Conference, even though they only got to 2 Stanley Cup finals, which they won both of them. They still were that good of a team. Heck, the Avalanche have a 3rd Stanley Cup as a franchise in 2022. They are now the franchise that has the most Stanley Cups without losing a final, with 3. So anyway, yeah, it changed Colorado forever. Who knows what that franchise would have been like if Patrick Roy wasn't there. So thank you, Mario Tremblay, for helping Colorado out, screwing over Detroit, and majorly screwing over Montreal in a sense. So I hope you're happy with your decision. It's been well debated, but still, you should not have done it. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.